Thanks for tuning in for Investment Insight. Appreciate you guys coming here on this sunny day. We had a cool little question to start off that I'm going to start off with this morning. But I'll do, obviously, Investment Insight's an educational space. We do our best to provide accurate information. Please seek out legal, competent, financial, and accounting advice to your unique situation before you make a decision. But I had a couple of good quotes today. I guess I got on a George Washington kick yesterday. But I really, it's one of the things that every time when I see politics the way they go in America today and the world, I just get more and more appreciation for George Washington as I get older. Just the fact that he gave up power, he was in office for 8 years, he lost most of his wealth to become president. That is so uncommon in 2022. If you think about Putin or other things going on, everybody wants more power, or the situation right now between Taiwan and China, if they go to war, it's just interesting times going on. But 99% of failures come from people who make excuses. George Washington. This is probably my favorite ones. To contract new debts is not the way to pay old ones. Because a lot of people really feel like, we have a whole thing in our culture which is, just borrow more money. It's cheaper interest. It's cheap. No, eventually, you have to get out of debt if you want to have anything. That's at least the way it works for me. The desire to perform all the time is usually a barrier to performing over time. Robert Olstein. It's like if you looked at the market and you said, I'm only going to look at how much money I made or lost in 2022. That'd be a pretty short-sighted way to look at investments. And if you made decisions based on only what happened this year, you'd probably make the wrong decision. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it. Albert Einstein. You think about it, now student loans, because interest rates have gone up, we're seeing some student loan interest rates at 12 to 14% to go to college. 12 to 14%. And I met with a couple yesterday, and they were telling me their situation, and they're like, should we pay off this debt? Or should we invest the money? Well, you should clearly pay off the debt. If you are actually paying 12 to 14% interest on your money, you need to pay off your debt. But it's funny because a lot of people they don't understand because they're just not taught. You get recessions, you have stock market declines. If you don't understand that's going to happen, then you're not ready and you won't do well in markets. Peter Lynch. Peter Lynch, Fidelity Magellan, ran that fund for forever, averaged 18% a year during his career for like 30 years, best performing mutual fund ever for active management. But we had a good question today to start off with, and what I was going to talk about today, if we get time, is a market update. How are companies doing in the United States? What's in the Inflation Reduction Act? Now, I'll tell you right now, that is the worst name for this act I've ever seen in my life, because all they did was spend a bunch of money and barely raise some taxes. And then where investments stand here in August. And so one of the most commonly sold investments, and probably this year will be an all-time high for this investment, is what's called an equity indexed annuity. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard this sales pitch before, but they used to come to O'Charlie's about twice a week. And, I've been so close to sitting down in the presentation, but they don't come to town anymore. They still come to Warren County. They just don't come to Coffee County as much anymore. But what they would say is, how would you like an investment where you can't lose any money, you're guaranteed to make a solid return, and Brent, if the market does well, you'll make money too? That's a good question, okay? And here's what we're also going to do. When you buy it, we're going to give you a bonus. We're going to give you a bonus when you make the decision to buy this thing, okay? And so that's what, basically, that's how it's sold. Now, oddly enough, do you know how long you have to go to school in the state of Tennessee to sell that product? 4 days. So most of the people offering that product don't even know what it is. So you really can't fault a lot of people because they don't even know what they're doing. When I was 22, I got offered a job by 3 of these companies, and they offered me a lot of income. They offered me a good salary, but I just had an uneasy feeling about what they were telling me, so I didn't take the jobs. I didn't know anything about it. I just had an uneasy feeling, so I didn't take them. Okay? So here are a couple options. Obviously, most people are unhappy because this year the stock market's lost some money, and the bond market has too. And so people are looking at investments and saying, well, I've lost money this year, and I'm not happy about that. And so that's how a lot of people have looked at investments. And so a lot of times when people lose money in a year, they think, well, I got to make a change. I got to do something different, But it's interesting to me because one of the things that this year has really proven is pretty much every asset class, whether it be real estate, stock market, bonds, everything outside of commodities has pretty much lost money this year. And so it's funny, it's like I see Phil over there, and last time I talked to Phil, he didn't tell me, you know what, Brent, I'm going to sell my house. It lost money. I could have got more money 6 months ago, so I'm going to sell my house today. No, people don't say that, right? Because they say, and I think a lot of that comes down to people don't understand what's inside their investments. If you knew that you owned Apple computer and it was down, one of my sons, his phone broke on the cruise ship, and we're going to have to buy a new phone. So I'm like, well, how much does a new iPhone cost? So I went out there and well, it's $35 a month, or like $40-some a month. Like, when did an iPhone become a car payment? And then they're like, for 3 years. I'm like, oh, an iPhone now costs $1,600. So when the iPhone came out, if I'm not mistaken, it was $359, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken. But think about why Apple stock has gone up in value so much. They were charging $359 for that iPhone, and now they're charging $1,600. So surely that company is going to make money, because guess what? Do my kids care if it costs $35 a month? No, why not? That's right, Kwezu. I get a new iPhone, and Daddy's paying for it. And I already have my 7-year-old told me, hey, Daddy, I'm so excited when I turn 12 because I get a new iPhone too. And I'm like, great. And it wouldn't be that big a deal if you didn't have 7 kids. But anyway, but it's just funny how the entitlement thing really kicks in pretty early. But they're in for a rude awakening with me. Anyway, you get a used phone and it's going to break. That's why that one broke, because it's my old phone. I hadn't used it in 4 years, so it was paid for. Anyway, but let me kind of explain these products to y'all. So one of the things, here's how an equity indexed annuity works, okay? So typically, this is not all of them, but most of them, you lock your money in for 10 years. You have a couple options. So you have like a guaranteed fund, or maybe a, let's say S&P 500. But, and the way it gets a little tricky is, if there's typically a daily, monthly, and annual cap. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at last month. You know what the best month was for the stock market this year? It was July. I think the S&P was up about 8% in July. So if you were investing and you missed the best month of the year, do you make any money that year? Typically, you don't make very much money, because typically when it goes to the markets, unfortunately, markets don't tend to move like this. They tend to move like this. And so whenever you have an equity indexed annuity, what they do is they typically have a monthly cap, which means, so if the S&P did 12% this month, and your monthly cap is 1%, how much money do you make? If the cap's 1% and the market did 12, how much do you get? 1%. Okay? Then they also have what's called a participation percentage typically. So if the market, you're going to get, it might be 50%. But let's say the annual cap was 4%. And the market did, let's say the market did 1% every month. How much do you get? 4%. Okay? So the way that the insurance company makes money is they're putting the interest they would have paid you on a CD or on a bond, they're putting that money into the stock market through an option for 1 year. If the market does 20%, they get 20% minus what they pay you, which is 16%. If the market does nothing, you get paid nothing. And what do they lose? Whatever the interest was to buy the option. They lose half or 1%. Okay? And then how this works, of course, is they do what's called an income rider. Now, I love income riders, but I hate income riders. Because you know what? They won't sell an income rider to me because I'm 39. Right? I guess you should, anyway. I don't know why I asked you guys. I should know that. Are you all sorry? And so how the income rider works is most income riders will start when you're 65 years old, and they'll pay you, let's say, 5% a year when you turn 65. How long is the average male, who's not as heavy as me, how long do they live to be? About 84. Once you make it to 65, 84, 85. And so if I pay you 5% a year, starting at 65 until you're 84, what have I paid you? Your own money back, minus 1 year, which I still get to keep. And so the problem with income riders is they charge an additional fee on top of this that goes against your cap. And so it's kind of like Brent, you give me all your money, and I'll pay you income for as long as you live. Because I'm going to guess that you're going to live on, if I take everybody in this room, we're going to have an average life expectancy, right? So can the insurance company lose money? Not really, unless the market goes down. And if that happens, they'll just go call for a bailout from the government. Right? That's what happened back in 2008. That's why I stopped selling annuities. I remember the guy that sold Hartford Insurance. He told me, he's like, you know what? In the Civil War, we insured Robert E. Lee's house. And when they burned it down, we paid it out. Yeah, well, you know what? In 2008, they fired half their staff and basically almost went bankrupt until the government bailed them out. Because you know what? They didn't burn Hartford, Connecticut. They burned Arlington, Virginia. They didn't actually burn Arlington, but his house is still there. But anyway. And so how these work, of course, is they're a 10-year investment. You can only get 10% of your money out a year. If you keep it for, so if you said, Brent, you call me today and say, Brent, I want my money, guess how much money you get? All of it, all the money it's worth in my office. You get every dollar that it's worth that day. You can get your money that day. With this, you get 10% a year, unless it's every 10 years. Or if you die. If you die, you can get your beneficiaries can get the money out. And then they'll give you a bonus. And the person selling it tends to get 8 to 20% up front, depending upon if they do a 5-year or a 15-year product. So if you gave me $1 million and I got paid 20% up front, which is $200,000, how many vacations do you think I'm going to go on, guys? A lot. I'm not going to be here working in the morning. I will be because it's me. But the point is that's a big hit. And that's why you can't get your money out for 10 years without paying a penalty, because they just paid somebody 10% up front, usually. So that's how these work. Right now at our office, we have $8 million in customers we helped that have bought these that regret buying. That we helped with. And some of the people in this room have them. I won't say who it is. Okay. Here's another, if you want something similar to this, that I think is a better product, they have something called a market-linked CD. Now, how this works is you typically lock your money in for 6.5 years. They're not liquid, though, so you can't sell it any day you want. If you wanted to get your money, you can't necessarily get your money. They're not liquid. But let's say you put $100,000 in this. If the S&P 500, so you can buy an option with these. So think of it this way. If you've got a CD, right? With a CD, you get paid what? What do you get paid on a CD? Interest. So instead of you taking the interest on the CD, the bank is taking that CD and they're putting that interest in the stock market. So your principal's still insured, but the money they would have paid you in interest is now in the stock market. But instead of putting it in the stock market where you can only get a little bit, they're buying an option. So instead of putting in $1,000, you're getting to buy $50,000 worth. Okay? And so, because how stock options work is you've only got the option to buy it over a year period, right? So we know the math here is the stock market tends to go up 60% of the time. That means 40% of the time it tends to go. So usually 1 out of 3 years you lose money, 2 out of 3 years you make money. And so if you buy the option, 2 out of 3 years you're going to probably win, and 1 year you're going to lose. That's pretty much how it works. And so that's what you're betting on with one of these products. The difference with a CD is, at least one of the ones I recently looked at, is when the S&P 500 goes up 20%, guess how much you get? 20%. Guess how much money I get paid to sell those? 1%. Now, if you're in the insurance industry, would you rather get paid 20 or 10% or 1%? Would you want your money to be insured by the FDIC or would you want it to be insured by Hartford Insurance Company? Which one do you think is better? I know which one I think is better, if you guys couldn't already tell. Okay, the difference with this is there's a tax issue. The one negative on these is you can't buy them in IRAs. The IRS will not allow you to buy this in an IRA. Okay? Which I think is stupid, but I think it's because the insurance company has the government in their pockets. And I think when you look at this new inflation bill, you'll agree with me once you see how it all went down. But the other negative is if the market goes up 20%, the IRS recognizes you made 20% that year, which means you now have to start paying taxes. But guess what you can't get necessarily? You can't get your money out. So you're paying taxes on money you haven't really made yet because you haven't actually recognized the transaction. But the IRS considers, because that option expires after 1 year, they consider that recognized income. Okay? But if you think about it, only in the Great Depression did we have a 6.5-year period where the market did not recover and come back up. So the reason why they're doing 6.5-year CDs, it's not an accident. They look at that Great Depression and say, odds are you're going to make money over a 7-year period. And I would argue you'd probably make more money on this than a regular CD, but people don't like the tax consequences. Another option is you just do this yourself. Instead of paying somebody else to build these packages for you, go out, buy a bond with $100,000 or 20 of them, $5,000 each. Let's say they're paying 5%. Take the $5,000 in interest, buy your own option. That's what we do here for people that want to do this. Is we'll just go buy it ourselves. Why do we need a middleman? Just go do it. Because you think about it, if you're using me, and then if you use that company, you're using 2 middlemen to get the same thing done. But it's not FDIC insured, so people don't like that. But this is probably, to me, the best way to make money, because if you lose money on something, when the option comes due after a year, that money's in your account. So you have that money to pay the taxes. If you did make money, you could write it off your taxes. So I like this better, fits me. But those are the 3 ways to get this done. This right here is the most commonly sold investment in small towns in our area. And the reason why is because people get paid. Now, I'm very fortunate. I make a very good living. And we charge about 1% of the value of our accounts. But imagine paying somebody 10% of your principal the first day you meet them. And you can't get your money for 10 years. Okay? I don't like that, because if you want to leave, if you don't want to do business with us, you get your money back and I send you a check for the refund. You know? I mean, I think we've written 4 refund checks this entire year. We've had 4 customers leave, and you could ask the girls, the day I got back, I will write the check, and it's done. You don't get any refund with this. Once you pay that money is gone. You give somebody $100,000, they take $10,000. Day one. Yeah. So. But if you want your money, and in some cases, most of them are about 10 years, but there are some terrible cases that are 15 or 20. I've got one lady who has one she's got a penalty on it for 30 years. We can't get the money. 30 years. I want to strangle those people. Anyway, anybody have questions about this? If anybody sees one of these, I'm happy to talk to you more in person about specifics, but these are a good thing to familiar with because almost every free lunch mailer that comes in the mail are people selling this because they make so much money, right? And obviously we're a fiduciary, so I have to do what's in your best interest, and I don't see how in court I could argue this is better than this or this is better than that. If we're in court and I say this is insured by Hartford, this is insured by FDIC, what's the jury going to say? Which one is better? FDIC. This one you get 100% of the market gain. This you get 20% of the market gain. This one I get paid 10%. This one I get paid 1%. People are going to say. Sort of. Yeah. Well, it's very commonly sold. So anyway, we'll get started on the rest of it. I'm just really happy because, and I know this is something, since I started doing business here in Manchester, I've seen where this was so prevalent when I started my career here 15 years ago. And now that we've informed so many people, we rarely see them anymore. Because in the last 15 years, we've been able to educate people to the point where they're not doing this anymore. But if you go to Warren County, still the most commonly sold thing. And here in town, a couple of the most notable advisors, one of which I had some respect for in the past, about 3 years ago started selling all his customers in these two. Because the money, you can make so much more money getting paid 10 to 20% up front than you can getting paid 1% a year, that it just became too enticing. People did it. So that's my opinion why they did it, but you have to ask them their motivation. So, okay. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the market. Here's the really cool news, is 87% of U.S. companies have reported results so far. 75% are making more money than expected. And 70% are making higher revenue than expected. You want to know why the stock market had such a good month in July? It's very simple. U.S. companies were expected to actually make less money than last year. And they ended up making 6.7% more money this quarter than before. What's really weird about this is the best two performing areas of the market is energy and airlines. You'll probably never hear me say that again. You think about this, right? Oil companies are making the most money they've ever made before, and so are airlines that burn fuel. I mean, I flew in from Miami on Sunday morning. We got up at 2 a.m. for a 5 a.m. flight with all of our kids, right? You know how many empty seats there were on that plane? None. You know how rude everybody was at the airport on each time it was? Every single person there was straight up rude. The cruise ship we were on was completely full. They didn't care if you were there or not. I know people are saying we're in a recession, and we could be going to a recession, but I don't see it when I'm traveling around. When every flight is full at 5 a.m. on Sunday morning to fly to Miami, that is not a recession. That plane used to have 30 people on it. That is a plane going to Nashville to pick people up at 8 or 9 o'clock that are getting back home. Nobody who wants to get up at 2 in the morning? I mean, I get up at 4 in the morning, but I don't want to get up at 2 in the morning. And so when we look at earnings, what's been amazing is the biggest hit on earnings has been financial companies, because financial companies have been setting aside all this money for these losses that are coming. But yet they haven't come yet. But if you look at JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, The reason why their earnings were down is because they took money out of their profit and set it aside for loan losses that haven't happened yet. Now, just imagine how different that is than 2008. Remember 2008 when that recession hit? Nobody was ready for it. All these companies have been taking money and they've been setting it aside for a rainy day. And so that is the reason why the market had such a good quarter. It's also the reason why it's hard for the market to not go, it's at a fair value right now because the profits are holding up. And if companies keep making more money, I mean, look, an iPhone used to be $1,200 when I bought my last one. Now it's $1,600. Apple stock at one point was down 30%. Do you think that's justified? Does anyone really feel like Apple's going to be charging less for their phones in 10 years? Anybody think Apple's going to make less money in 10 years? I don't. Apple's going to make more money, so it's a good stock. There's no reason for that company to go down. Amazon, one of the worst performing companies this year. Does anybody really think Amazon's going away? Or they're not going to be a good business in the long term? And so it's funny, one of my really good friends was an attorney in Nashville, and I remember in 2008, he's like, man, I love high gas prices. I got all my money in oil stocks. You can complain about it or you can do something about it, right? And you can be mad that the British invaded America, or you can grab a gun and shoot at them, and then they'll leave eventually. That's the way to go. And so be proactive. Don't shoot anybody, though. I'm not saying that. And so the cool thing is, U.S. companies are not showing any sign of an imminent collapse in the economy. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit what's weird. There's some other stuff at the end here if we get time. But I want to cover this Inflation Reduction Act, if that's what you call it. So I am very disappointed that this may become law. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. So it's funny, always to me, when the government says they're going to do an Inflation Reduction Act. How do you reduce inflation? You guys know, what are the two ways to reduce inflation for the government? But the government, that's a good answer. Stop printing money, which means you have to stop spending money, or you got to raise taxes, or you do both. It's funny, everybody's like, nobody wants them to raise your taxes. I do. I want them to raise my taxes and cut spending, because then eggs aren't $4 for a carton of eggs. I want to have more money. That means I want my money to go farther. So I don't want inflation to be crazy. I don't want Hitler to be president of the United States. Hitler became president of Germany because of inflation. Right? So the way you stop inflation is you don't print money. Now, when you go out there and you spend a bunch of money, that's not reducing inflation. And we'll talk about this in a second, but the government has spent about $5.5 trillion more money than they had the last 2 years, and that's not going to reduce inflation. It's just not going to work. So here are some of the things in the bill. So they're going to do what's called a 15% minimum corporate tax if your business is $1 billion or more. I'll just be the first one to tell you, I hate it when they start writing these complicated rules. Because there's somebody out there that knows how to get around them. But this is their idea. The idea is, so the corporate tax rate in America is 21%. That's what corporations pay on taxes. Now, have you guys ever met Mr. Apple? Do you guys know him? How about Mr. Amazon? See, corporations aren't people. They're owned by people. So it's always funny, like, well, we're going to get that evil corporation. Man, I hate Walmart. You guys all own Walmart here, by the way. I don't like Walmart either, but you own it. You are Walmart, right? So the way to tax, when you tax a corporation with a minimum tax, but then they don't include things like, so there's something called depreciation, right? So for instance, anybody driving to Murfreesboro lately? You look on the right side of the road, you see that big concrete building going up there right there? You guys know what that building is? It's Amazon, I believe. And when Amazon builds that building, they don't get to write all that off their taxes. They have to depreciate it. So one of the reasons why Amazon doesn't pay a lot of taxes is because they are employing, if they're not the largest employer, they're the second, I think they're the largest employer in the United States now. In the last 3 years, they have hired hundreds of thousands of people. Now, some people would say, well, Amazon needs to pay more taxes. They're making more money. Well, technically, Amazon is paying more taxes because if there's 400,000 more people working there, they're paying taxes. Now, you could argue on what's efficient and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, they talked about in the bill removing depreciation from this calculation. If you get rid of depreciation, are they going to build new Amazon warehouses? No. So are they going to create so many jobs? They're not. It's not going to work. So they cut it out. They didn't do it. So basically they said there's going to be a 15% tax, but how do we enforce it? Because you know people are going to voluntarily pay more taxes and not try to get around the law. Right? Stupid. That's one thing they did here. The second thing they did was they did a 1% tax on share buybacks. Now, they'll get some money on this. When a company buys back their own stock, they are going to tax it. Okay? But here's what's crazy, right? If I'm in a 21% tax bracket and I borrow $100 to buy back my own stock, I get to write off $21. And they're going to charge me, I get to write off interest. On $100, the interest rate would be 5%, sorry. So it's $5, and I get to write off $1. And now they're going to tax me $1. So those companies would just borrow the money, get the tax deduction, and when they pay the tax, they'll use it with the government's money to pay the tax. Do you understand? Because if you borrow money, you're paying interest. Interest is tax deductible for a business. And they pay the tax. They're going to pay taxes at 1%, and they're going to get a deduction of 1%. So now instead of using cash to pay off their debt, they're just going to borrow more money. Is that logically what you want businesses to do? No. But is that what they're going to do? Yes. Is this tax going to work? Yes and no. They're going to get money, but they're going to lose it on the deduction side. I hate this way of taxing. If you want to tax people, you do a sales tax. You know why you do a sales tax? Because you get it at the point of sale. You can't mess around with a sales tax very much. You know, if I go to, when we bought this food today, we pay grocery tax. Well, actually, I think this month might be tax. No, last month was tax-free month for groceries. You pay taxes. I pay when I buy it. I can't cheat out of the system, right? Because they pay it when I buy it right there. The drug dealer, when he goes and buys a Snickers, he pays taxes. Does he pay when he exchanges hands on his heroin? No, but he pays it when he buys his Snickers. He pays it when he buys a car. That's the way you tax people. That's how you get money. That's my opinion. Okay. They're going to negotiate on 10 drugs. Now, how random is that? Medicare is going to negotiate prices on 10 drugs. Who are those poor people who didn't have the lobbyists to back up the 10 drugs? You know, because there's only 10 drugs in America people on Medicare use. Most people, like my grandmother, if the doctor would have let them, she would have been on 20 drugs herself. She would let the doctor. So they're going to negotiate on 10 drugs. I agree they should go. I mean, Medicare can clearly save money by negotiating on drug prices because Medicare is the biggest buyer of drugs in the world. You guys remember, there's a senator from West Virginia. You guys know what his name is? Joe Manchin, right? Well, you know what his daughter does? She sells the EpiPen. You remember the lady that raised the EpiPens to $800 an EpiPen? You know, my wife's got allergies, so we don't have an EpiPen. We could use one because she can have an allergy attack. It's $800 and they expire every 2 years. Okay? Guess who did that? His wife. Do you think that drug's being negotiated? Think it's one of the 10? I don't know, but I guarantee you it's not. If I'm wrong, somebody prove me wrong. We look at the bill. But they're only going to negotiate on 10 drugs. So this is what's so weird. Is Medicare doesn't even have the right to negotiate prices. They only can negotiate prices on 10 drugs. So you know that somebody didn't have very good lobbyists, right? Like, how do you pick randomly the 10 number, too? Doesn't that just sound like some guys were like drinking one night and decided, let's just go with 10? It sounds like idiotic things to say and do, just my opinion. They are going to cap insulin, if you're on Medicare, to $35 a month. Now, how are they going to cap it? Does the government get to buy the company? So who's going to pay the difference? The government is. If you tell people that you're only going to pay $35, is the company selling insulin going to be like, oh, we'll give it to you for $35? This isn't a communist system. This is a capitalistic system. So the only way to reduce the price of insulin is to get more competition, more people selling the drug. I mean, there's a reason why patents are supposed to expire. So new people can get into business and compete on price. All they said in this bill is the government's going to pay the difference after $35, basically. So, and that's not done yet, but that's what looks to be the assumption. And my dad takes insulin, and I can tell you it's very expensive. It's a problem, but this doesn't fix the problem. The government's now printing more money. Medicare recipients can spend no more than $2,000 a year on drugs. Okay? If I told you guys that after the first $2,000 you spent, I could get as much money as I wanted from the government, what am I going to do? Joe Manchin's daughter sells 2 EpiPens. They can't buy any more drugs. They're all free, right? So it's just like, whenever President Bush put that law in place and he said, Medicare is going to start covering prescription drugs. Well, of course drug companies made a bunch of money because the government will pay any price. Look, if you told my grandmother would be 101, and if you told her she had to spend $10 out of pocket for a prescription drug, oh my God, she'd have a fit. She would go to the doctor and say, where's their drugs at? What else can I do? But if you told her it was free, oh yeah, hot dog. Okay? And I love my grandmother, okay? But I remember, that's how she was. If it's free, I remember my other grandmother, they gave her that free wheelchair, and then she didn't like using it, so she just she sent it back to him, even though it was free, because she's like, I'm not taking this. But my other grandmother's like, oh, it's free. Give me 3 of them. And that's how it works, is you can't, if you want to reduce the price of drugs, you have to go in and you have to people got to spend some money out of their own pocket. It is funny though, because remember the gentleman, that Shekel guy, the same time they raised the drugs and EpiPens, that other guy raised the drug prices on AIDS treatments. And he's in jail right now. He's in federal prison for fraud. But he's not related to Joe Manchin. My best picture of Joe Manchin was when the protesters got to him and he was in his Maserati driving away. He's in a $300,000 sports car driving away from protesters. Doesn't that say exactly who he is? Just my opinion. Okay. The IRS is going to get $80 billion a year to audit your tax return. This will raise some money. That'll raise some money. This, to me, is our first big tax increase. Because they're going to use $80 billion a year to audit people's taxes. Because, look, I can tell you, most people make a mistake in their tax return. So there's some money they could get. So that will raise some money. Temporarily, because the IRS will eventually waste it. But that's how to go from there. The Affordable Care Act is going to get more subsidies until 2025. Why would they do subsidies until 2025? Why would the subsidies end in 2025? Whoa. They just gave everybody cheaper insurance until the election's over. And then they'll pass a spending bill, which will push it out the next year. So just keep kicking down the road. That's not going to cost anything, by the way. It's funny. My job here is to manage within the law. And so the way the Affordable Care Act is, it doesn't look at your net worth. It just looks at your income. So I have several clients that are worth, $3 million, $4 million each, paying nothing for health insurance, or $300 a month. Because it doesn't look at your assets, it just looks at your income. And if you got Roth IRAs, if you got tax-free money, that money, when you pull it out, you don't pay any taxes, so guess what your income is? Now, it's legal, but should it be legal? No. But that's the law. So that's what we've got here with that in. Now, this one is kind of good and kind of bad. There's going to be a $7,500 credit to buy electric vehicles. Now, become an investment insight. I'm a very big fan of electric cars for a myriad of reasons. Is I would like for our country to go to nuclear power and tell all these other countries that we don't need you anymore and sell our natural gas to Europe. And then I guarantee you, if we started building nuclear power plants, that war in Ukraine would stop pretty quick. Because the only reason why Putin's doing it is because we talked about last month, is he's making 50% more money today than he was before the war started. You cut his money off, he'll stop killing people. If you're actually, and this is a Republican and Democratic issue where everybody should agree on. If you got clean power that doesn't pollute the air, and you have good electricity, then my boys don't have to go fight a war in the Middle East because you don't need their oil. That's something everybody should agree on. Now, this right here, though, is a unique thing, is they're giving us $7,500 credit for new vehicles and a $4,000 credit for used ones. You know what? Man, there's got to be a connected car dealership in the state of Washington. Because you know what? The state of Washington, you don't have a sales tax. So if Bill over there, he goes out and buys his new Tesla he's been wanting for 20 years, and he sells it to me, it's now used. We just got 2 credits off our taxes. And there's no sales tax in the state of Washington, so guess what we pay in taxes? Now, Tennessee, that wouldn't work. But you guarantee somebody in Washington State's thinking, I built my dealership in the right place. Right? And so the cars can't cost more than $55,000. But here's what's even neater. The trucks can't cost more than $80,000. You ever heard of Ford Motor Company? Who's on pace to sell and they're going to make them here in Tennessee, the new electric F-150. Ford Motor Company. What do you want to bet it's going to be right under 80 grand? Now, here's what's weird to me, though. Why would a car be treated differently than a truck? Do you guys see a lot of trucks with like 50 people in them? Or do you see one dude about this tall driving a truck? That's what I see, right? I see one dude driving his big truck around, and it's not a farmer. Somebody like me. Yeah, what do I need a pickup truck for? I don't farm. Yeah, haul off my garbage, right? But the cool thing is, if I got my truck, I get $80,000. My truck qualifies, but my car qualifies too. But Teslas all sell for like 60 or 70 grand mostly, so the lower version. So they're not going to really qualify for this because he's been very vocal. He's anti the current president. So look who just got cut out. But this is a Ford Motor and Chevy tax credit all day long. And here, we're in Tennessee, we're benefiting because they're building that factory in Memphis. And it keeps getting bigger, by the way. But really, is this the right way to do things? Not to me. But the cool thing is electric cars already surpassed the 5% mark, which is what happens when they start getting adopted. So they're going to be adopted anyway. Electric cars are coming. The problem electric cars have is, how do you power them? You still got to have the power source. Now, another thing it's weird is, 40% of the components must be made in the United States. What country is the largest electrical part manufacturer for electric vehicles in the world? You know what country that is? China. So they're still going to be buying those parts from China. So at the end of the day, they really haven't changed much on that one. Now, here's what's interesting though. The electric parts, they can still be made in China. But all that lithium, it's got to come from where? USA. Now, how odd is that? The parts for the electric car can come from China, but the lithium's got to be mined here in America. Somebody's clearly been buying lithium mining land here in our country, because how odd would it be like, well, the batteries can be made in China, but the lithium's got to be made here. These are odd things, but they all make sense in about a year or two, right? We'll understand more in a year or two. What's that? Could be. He's the largest landowner in the world, the United States. Here's what's crazy about lithium. Lithium was $50,000 per ton in 2020. It's $476,000 per ton today. Think this is going to cause the price to go down? No. Really, they need to. Yeah, you should have bought some lithium farmland to mine. They're going to spend $113 billion for renewable electric plants. The cool thing is, one of the good things is, they did put in a weird thing for nuclear power. And this is a truly odd thing in the bill. Is they're going to give a 10-year credit for solar power, where they'll pay 30% of what it costs to build solar plants. So they'll pay 30% of the cost. They're going to continue that for 10 years. But they're also going to do a 30% credit if you buy a battery storage system at your house. Now, to me, that's odd. I don't think anybody's going to do that. But it looks like what they're doing is, if you guys know, Texas has been running out of electricity. Well, Texas has been working with Tesla to build batteries. Because the whole thing about power is, one of the biggest problems with electric cars and electric power is having the storage of electricity. Because you have to turn the power plants off at night when you don't need it, right? And so if you build batteries, you can keep the power plants going 24 hours a day, and when it gets hot, you turn the batteries on. Or it gets cold, you turn the batteries on. And so there's a 30% credit now in there for storing electricity at your house. They'll pay 30% of the cost. So that's a weird thing I don't really understand well. And for nuclear power, they are going to pay $30 billion to keep old nuclear power plants open. What they're going to do, but there's a weird rule. You've got to pay your workers a certain dollar an hour wage, and then it qualifies. So there's something in there that's unique that I don't really understand as well. But that is what is inside the bill. Our deficit last year was $2.8 trillion. Okay? You want to know why there's inflation? Now, I'm going to ask you guys, I know I'm probably pretty biased, but do you feel like this is going to reduce inflation? Think lithium's going to get cheaper? No. The sad part is, electric cars have already crossed the finish line. They're already over 5% of the production. So people that are going to buy electric cars are just going to keep getting better. I mean, right now, the best deal for a car is a plug-in hybrid. Because if you spend $3,000 more, you can get a car that'll get 50 miles electric and then switch to gas. So for me, that's the winner, because I only drive about 50 miles a day typically. So if most of my trips can be electric, I'll buy an electric car for a $3,000 investment. But I'm not going to go all electric, because if I got to go a far trip, it's harder to do stuff. That's just me. But my little brother's got an electric car. He's got an electric Hyundai, and that's all he drives. And he goes to Knoxville all the time and does his thing, and he's fine. Fills up here at the Arby's, gets his car charged when he comes through. That's what he does. So you can do it. So this is what's in the bill. But none of this stuff's going to really reduce inflation. Mainly because they really didn't raise taxes again. If you're going to spend all this money, you have to pay for it. You can't. Now, what will happen, of course, is, and we'll talk about this in a second, is if the Republican Party takes over Congress or the House of Representatives this year, then a lot of the spending will start going away. But this spending is going to happen over the next 10 years. So I've never spent the money for 10 years. Anybody have questions about this? Yeah. 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 You're going to be broke your whole life. You're going to be broke. And that's the whole thing about compound interest, right? So, but that's also why you're starting to see home prices go down. Because now the interest rates have gone up, which we'll go over that right now. Now the interest rates are going up, home prices are going down. Because look, when that payment is $700 a month more than it was a year ago, they can't afford the house. You know, everything really is about physics. You do one thing, for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. You know, these are good intentions. They want to get America more electric. The problem with the good intentions is you still are getting your power from natural gas, which right now, natural gas in America is relatively cheap versus the rest of the world, but it's still, because of the war in Russia and Ukraine, it's 5 times higher than it was 10 years ago. So it's not cheap anymore. You know, but it's unfortunate because the number one way to fix inflation in this bill would be build a bunch of nuclear power plants and take the natural gas in our country and sell it to Europe, right? Because then you could reduce inflation because you reduce the price of energy around the whole world. But they're not doing that. Okay, so where are we at right now for August, and where's the market going to go? That's the next thing. Okay. So as we saw, markets came off their lows this year in July. Maybe this will be the low for the year. Maybe it'll be a bigger low. But the biggest reason why markets came back up was companies are making more money than people thought. Companies are really making a lot of money. And here's another thing that factors too. Inflation appears to be going down. And how do we see that? Well, first the way we look at it is let's look at oil. Oil was $90.16 a barrel yesterday. On June 13th, it was $120.93. Now, if you guys didn't know this, the largest consuming country in the world of oil is China. China turned off their refineries whenever they did their COVID lockdown. That's one of the main reasons why gas prices are still so high. There's not a shortage of oil, there's a shortage of gasoline and diesel. And so almost all new production for energy has been made in Asia because that's where people are driving more cars. And when you shut down those refineries, remember, oil at $80 a barrel used to mean gasoline was $2.50 a gallon here. You know? 2014, oil was all over $90 to $80 a barrel. It was all over that area. So that's what we're seeing there. The next thing on inflation, besides oil, is mortgage rates. Mortgage rates 2 weeks ago were 5.54%. A year earlier, they were 2.76%. You want to know why the stock market and the bond market both dropped this year? Interest rates have doubled this year. What's truly odd to me is we were looking at CDs yesterday for a client, and CD rates are 3%. But local banks are still paying 1%. Why? Because they can. They can make money on it, right? Are they charging me less interest on my building? No, they're still paying you the same interest rate because they just haven't adjusted their rates. New home construction dropped 14% for new home starts in July. Now, what's really interesting about that is if you're going to build a house, what month do you typically want to start building your house? July, August, because it's dry. You don't really want to start building a house in February, right? It's cold and wet. But what we're starting to see is new home construction is just plummeting for new homes. And that's related to this interest rate. When that payment goes up, the house goes down. And you're already seeing that. You're seeing a lot, like this house behind this property here. They're crazy asking $1.8 million for that. But I bet you 5 or 6 months ago, probably about 9 months ago, they could have gotten it or close to it. They're not going to get it now. Unless someone's a complete moron. Because it's all floodplain. And it's not that big a house. Right? And it's a lot of mowing. All I see is a lot of mowing over there. I don't see something great. I see a lot of mowing. I used to mow lawns, so I know what that looks like. So that is going to bring inflation. Lumber futures are down 62% as of August 7th. Lumber futures are down 62%. Lumber is actually right near where it traded from 2017 to 2020. Lumber's gone down that much. Wheat, this is what interesting is. Wheat has gone down like a rock. Wheat was $1,306 a bushel in May. I'm not doing the bushel right. It's bushel, whatever, some kind of fraction. I didn't do that fraction right. Now it's 778. It's almost back down to where it was when Russia invaded Ukraine. You guys want to know why wheat's gone down? Because a bunch of American farmers, when they saw Russia invade Ukraine, what did they start planting? And everybody thought we weren't going to get any rain. We got a lot of rain this summer. I remember the stories, all these people complaining. It actually flooded in St. Louis, pretty close to where I grew up, because they have so much rain. We got rain now. But the thing is, when everybody saw Russia was invading Ukraine, they started planting wheat. I talked to a friend of mine, and they said that 70% of the corn crop was actually planted in Ukraine. They plan on planting. And now, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's what it is. It's wrong. Yeah, you got. I did the fraction wrong. Yeah, you're right, Jimmy. But what you're seeing is the market did its thing. There was a little bit of panic. People saw they could make a lot of money. They started planning more of it. And so what's interesting is I had a customer swear at me because he wanted to buy wheat at this price right here. He's like, it's going up like crazy. It's going to keep moving. I'm like, you missed it, man. The market moves so quickly. If you would have known ahead of time, you could make money. But you're telling me you're smarter than everybody in the world? I just don't believe that's likely. So we find ourselves basically at a unique spot when we look at the market. I know we're getting close on time. And this was really weird to me, is if you look at the numbers, is people today, when they say about confidence about the economy, the numbers on the economy are lower than they were at the depths of COVID. People today are now saying they feel worse today about the economy than they did when the COVID crisis was keeping us all locked in homes. But here's what's weird. They haven't stopped spending money. Let me give you an example. So when COVID hit, and it was really bad, the national savings rate hit 33.8%. That means people were saving 33.8% of the money they made. Because if you're worried you're going to lose your job, if you're worried you're not going to be able to pay your bills, what's the first thing you start doing? Saving money. Today, it's 5%. Huh? What's that? Yeah, they're spending money crazy. And what's funny is, Kwezu, they're reporting that they're worried and they're scared and things are going bad, but yet they're still... So are they actually scared? No. And this is truly an odd phenomenon. Because everybody's saying, oh, things aren't going to be very good in 6 months. Another trip to Miami. And so what's interesting about that is it's very, very, very strange. Because usually when people get scared, they start saving money. And they're not. And the thing about it is nobody here today is when the Spanish flu hit the world, for 10 years in the 1920s, we saw the economy go crazy because 3 to 5% of the world's population died. And so when people looked at life, they said, you know what? I'm going to take that trip. I'm going to go on that vacation because I can't guarantee I'm going to be able to do it again. And so what's weird about this is, yes, they're not buying houses anymore. But they're still buying cars and they're still going on trips. And that's why airlines are seeing record profits while gasoline and fuel cost, June was probably the highest fuel cost airlines have ever seen, and they had their best quarter ever. And what's interesting about this is all this money people saved in 2020, 2021, they still have it. And so now they're spending it. What's even more interesting about it is 1/5 of U.S. workers are publicly saying they will change jobs in the next 6 months. Companies are preparing for a recession. They're putting money aside for a recession, and then when they do earnings, they say, well, we actually still made a lot of money, but it's going to be bad in the future. But is it? And so, obviously, when we look at the markets going forward, it's all going to be based on what actually happens with profit. But if people keep spending money, especially in the fourth quarter, most money in our country is spent in the fourth quarter, around Christmas, right? So if people still have the same attitude, you think Christmas is going to be a big Christmas? Yeah, and so it's very likely the market will probably have another good little downturn at some point this year. But if companies keep saying they're making more money and they keep doing it, it's going to be hard for the market to stay down. Because at the end of the day, if Apple starts charging $1,800 for their Christmas special for phones, but the cool thing is it's a 42-month payment and not a 36-month payment anymore. See? I just saved you money. And you think that you won't do it? Go get a car loan and say you want to do a 3-year car loan. No, you want to do 7 years. A 7-year car loan? Whew. And so, and that's what you're looking at. And so when we look at investments, it's very interesting because if companies keep overperforming, the market will recover very, very, very quickly back to where it is. And it may not be exactly where it was when we started the year off, but it really feels like the S&P at 4,400, it started off 4,800, is very, very achievable based on the profit levels, what we're looking at. Because you think about it, the number one thing that's been hurting us as investments is this thing called inflation. Unfortunately, the federal government is so stupid, they still don't get it. And they just went out and they're going to spend a bunch more money. The number one way you reduce inflation is you reduce the amount of money you print, and you do that by raising taxes and by cutting spending. And look, the Republican Party is pretty much against raising taxes. The Democratic Party is pretty much against, and the Republican Party against reducing spending. But at the end of the day, you have to do both. And so the thing about it is, let's say you guys get a 8% Social Security raise this year, which is likely. Okay. Well, carton eggs was $1.99. Now it's $4. Okay. Did you get a 50% raise? 100% raise? So did you get a raise? Wouldn't you be happier if they just didn't do a raise, and then the carton eggs didn't cost $2.50? You'd be better off. But that's harder because then you got to tell someone, I didn't give them a raise this year. So it's much more sneaky just to make everything cost more. And that's the way they're going to raise your taxes. And they already have. And so that's when we look at markets this year, that's what we're looking at. But these are really positive signs. Big thing, of course, is I really think that if you look at the lumber market, that just shows you that how much is changing with housing, that lumber has now returned to where it was from 17, 18, 19, and 20. It's back to the normal levels. But also, a good thing too is, when you're borrowing money at 2% interest, is there any incentive to pay your house off? You borrow at 5.5%? Yeah. So, any questions about this? Who's ready to go buy an electric car for the credit? Just joking. But anyway, well, thanks for you guys coming in today. Sorry we didn't get to cover some of the stuff I wanted to, but thanks for tuning in on Facebook Live. And if you have any questions or concerns, please email me at mckwealth.com or 931-728-2130. Thanks. Have a good day.